Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast today from Henderson, Nevada, Dr. Jeff Gross, who's a pioneering neurological surgeon turned regenerative medicine specialist. And he's the founder of Recelebrate, where he's helping people activate their body's natural healing capabilities to extend not just lifespan, but quality health span, which I love that you make that distinction. So welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, Jeff. It's a real privilege to
Thank you.
chat with you today.
The honor's mine. It's great to meet you. And thank you for inviting me to speak with you and your audience.
Great. Now, I'm particularly fascinated by your journey from the traditional surgery to looking at regenerative approaches, especially how it was your patients that first prompted this evolution. And I think we can all relate in some ways to our clients asking us questions and at some point saying, hang on a minute, there's something missing here that is clearly a need that our clients have. So looking forward to learning more about that. And also I'm very personally interested in the distinction between lifespan and health span that you focus on. And so let's start our conversation by asking you what impact you're aiming to make in the world today through your work.
Well, being someone that's taken in the Hippocratic Oath and taking it to heart every day, I'm here to help people achieve not only their health needs, but their health desires, whether that's, living living healthier longer, uh, better performance in exercise and sport, and getting the most efficient, body and physiology they can get, and help remove pain. And we do a lot of that. That's really the angle I started in and do quite a bit of still, but it's not the only thing.
So that's the neurological surgery side of it. Yeah. I'm always fascinated because I see medicine from an outsider, as a user, I guess, a patient, as and I'm guilty of this. I'm not putting this on the medical profession, but the mindset is we go and see our doctor when there's something wrong. And then, of course, our expectation is, okay, doctor, I've got something wrong. Please fix this. And so there's the idea of, okay, I can give you some medicine which will cure whatever ailment you have. Or if it's serious, there's surgical intervention. And yet the approach you're taking with your stem cell research is kind of the other side of that, which I think we all need to embrace this mindset of, well, I'm healthy. How do I keep being healthy? And how do I optimize my health? And how do I reduce the risk of contracting diseases that are around? And how do I prevent burnout that may cause psychological stress or issues? Yeah, so I'm really curious to hear your take on that and how you made the shift also to that philosophy through the regenerative medicine.
Well, I've got a lot to cover here based on your prompt. And so thank you for that. I think generally speaking, you're right. The modern Western civilization is a reactive sick care system, not a healthcare system. And I'm not the first to say that, but I'm happy to reiterate it because I believe it. And we all see it, right? You get an ailment, you go and you get a cure. And sometimes the ailments are new. They're brand new. They're created and manufactured sometimes in order to sell the cure, or at least the symptom management. Sometimes it's a cure, because if we were going to cure things, we have to get at the root cause. Well, looking back, it turns out nature's already done that for us, and we just need to pay close attention to it. And because we understand nature better all the time through fields of biochemistry and molecular cell biology, which is just looking at these smaller things happening inside of our bodies, inside of our organs, inside of our cells, and even smaller than that, inside of things within our cells, including chemical happenings in our cells. we know what's going on from nature. We know why a lot of plant, fruit, and vegetable micronutrients help us the way they do. We know missing vitamins and missing other things we need in supplementation. We know toxins and bad things in our food source or water source can affect us, our well-being. But the final common pathway of all of these negative influences on us is a process of chronic inflammation at the cell level that degrades our tissues faster than they ought to be. And that speeding up of the age process by this rather self-infliction of our environment is what the problem is. And anything we do to work against that in the anti-inflammatory sense, whether it's proper sleep, restorative sleep, exercise, proper diet, proper supplementation for what's missing in our diet, all kinds of different elements, even reducing mental stress or burnout, as you mentioned. All of these things suppress cellular inflammation, and that slows the aging process so that you can live longer and healthier in it, which is called health span. Because we don't want to just help people live longer. We want them to be healthy in that longer age, right? So we want to fill up the lifespan with health. So that's called health span. Otherwise, you're in a nursing home for your last decade or two, and no one wants that. So that's the main focus of what has caused me to add these elements back into my rather traditional practice of medicine, of neurosurgery. And now I lean more towards less surgery, more natural treatments. And cultures have had these for thousands of years, right? You look at Ayurvedic medicine from India and Chinese herb, things like this, herbology. This is not new. We just understand it better now. We know what these things are doing, and lo and behold, they can work. And we're learning to standardize it and know how much to give. So it's a little less of the eyeball amount and a little more precise. But that's the whole basis of what we call regenerative medicine, is tapping back into nature's own design and using it strategically to help people who have too much chronic inflammation, who have degeneration, who have these things. So that's the overarching philosophy behind what this is all about and why I was, eager to open my mind and expand my horizons in my professional life.
Yeah, and it's wonderful. I mean, there's a few people around now, and I've been following a lot of this stuff, getting on in my ears and being interested in, okay, how can I remain healthy going into my twilight years? It's great to see a lot of people out of the traditional medicine industry embrace other medicines. There's always been this idea, alternative medicine, and there's been that, that's no good, and then they say that's no good. Whereas I think, there's lessons to be learned from all of it, and there's probably ways to combine all these things as well. And as you say, some of this stuff's been around for thousands of years, so it hasn't lasted that long if there's nothing to it, right?
Yeah, and Jürgen, you just caused me to think of something. We look at these as a sort of alternative medicine, but for thousands of years, this was normal. And Western medicine over the last 100 to 200 years is the alternative.
Yeah.
We're going back to the original form.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to rebrand how we look at this.
There is a lot happening, though. You can take that view as Western medicine is kind of a fairly recent development in the whole history of humankind, but there is a lot of good that's come out of that. I mean, I recently had an MRI done on my knee because I've got a cyst, and I was just blown away by what you could see on that, and I thought, wow, you can see every little detail, and the analysis tools that we have is quite amazing. But one of the things that you're involved in is this whole idea of understanding more about stem cells. So talk to us a little bit more about that, because again, that's something that we've had stem cells since. I mean, every living thing has stem cells, right? But now we're starting to understand what their role is, and we're also understanding how we can access them and implement them in some
Correct.
ways by giving somebody stem cells. But the other thing that
Right.
I'm really curious about is how can we activate our own natural stem cells production
Right.
and utilize those.
All great concepts that overlap. Let's try to give a little stem cell 101 for the listeners. And, so you think about it for a second. When you, Jurgen, were a fertilized egg inside your mother's womb, you were a one cell. You're the master stem cell because all other cells in your body, the ones you have now, stemmed from that cell. Now you know why we call them stem
Yeah.
cells. Um, and that cell divided into 2 cells and 4 cells and 8 cells, what have you. And eventually those cells can make a human. And they're called omnipotent stem cells because they can actually create a life. At some point in the development of a fetus, those cells have differentiated and divided into less powerful cells, although still quite powerful, that maybe can only form a limb. Can't form a whole person, they can form a limb. And those are called pluripotent stem cells. And they're very interesting right now because there's a great amount of research looking at pluripotent stem cells in limb regeneration, finger regeneration, things like this. Because as humans, after the age of 5 or 6, we can no longer regenerate our limbs. Before the age of 5 or 6, if you cut the tip of your finger off beyond the last joint, you can still regenerate it. We lose that with age as our cells divide and develop. So other species, lizards, starfish, other things can regenerate a tail or an extremity. So we're looking at those genes, we're looking at the pluripotent stem cells because that will be the knowledge base that leads us down the line to helping people regenerate a limb. It's not here yet. Follow that. As that fetus develops into a, humanoid form, looking on an ultrasound, then it's born. And when it's born, it's still all made of stem cells. Some of those are maturing into their final organ cells, liver cells, spleen, muscle, brain. Those are called multipotent. They're not as powerful as the pluripotent, but they can still do a heck of a lot. And we use those to grow and develop during our childhood. They're in the growth plates of our bones, at the edges of our bones. They're creating the cartilage in our joints. They are renewing tissues that need to be renewed, like liver and skin. As we become an adult, we still bank these and use them every day. They have purpose, again, in renewing tissues, replacing tissues, helping us maintain our organs. If we're wounded or injured, they help us regrow them. Most of them are banked in our bone marrow, but we have them in fat and around vessels and in other places. But the biggest source is the bone marrow. So we tap into those all the time. However, as we age and are exposed to the environment that causes us to be chronically inflamed, as I alluded earlier, our cells, including our own stem cells, just aren't as good, and they can be even exhausted. They call it stem cell exhaustion, which is one of the theories of aging. Why do we age? Why do we degenerate? Because we can't repair as well. So if you look at 2 80-year-olds, one may be active and youthful and look on the outside younger, have more muscle mass, and have a better, energetic attitude. And one might be frail and, have loss of muscle and hunched over. They're born on the same day, 80 years earlier, but one has accumulated more chronic inflammation. So to really address these, we want to suppress that chronic inflammation, which means we want to tap into the most youthful stem cell activity. And at some age, we need help doing that because we could tap into our own stem cells. But when you change the oil in your car, I bet you don't put the old oil back in. So we like to use fresh oil. So I like the donated stem cells and biological material from the womb after a mother delivers your child by C-section. Congratulations, here's your baby. We were going to throw away this placenta and amniotic fluid and everything. Can we have it? because we have some good uses for it. That's what we're tapping into. So it's a very ethical process. These tissues are screened and handled properly. So that is the source, and that's how the beginning of how we strategize to reapply these younger things to help supercharge our older inflamed bodies. How can we do that naturally without getting those biologics? Because I understand in some places you can't get those, and Australia is one of them. It's very difficult to do that. You probably have to be off the books somewhere, but you can exercise. That's a great way to stimulate your own stem cells. You can follow other methods of hormesis. Hormesis means a slight stress on the body to build resilience. Examples might be fasting, maybe 1 day, maybe 3 days, cold plunge, hot sauna. So that would be 170 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll let you do the conversion for your listeners. For 20 to 25 minutes, 5 days a week. Like really, this is from the Finnish literature. It might be high intensity interval exercises, heavy weightlifting, but in short bursts. It doesn't have to take up your whole day. So these types of things stimulate us to have a survival response. That survival response stimulates our own stem cell activity. We can also get stem cell derived cellular messengers called exosomes, which are really the business end of the stem cells anyway. They are made by stem cells. They're smaller than stem cells, and they signal our own cells. That's how it works. Well, we can get those also from other sources. You can get them from bone broth, because bone broth comes from the bone stock, which is the bone marrow of an animal. And the bone marrow is where most of the stem cells are. You can get it from bone marrow itself, which is, edible. You can get it from, chicken soup and chicken stock. You can get it from milk, particularly colostrum, the early milk, the first milk. And then also, there are plants that many plants make stem cells and exosomes that have biologic intercommunication with our own cells. We call that interkingdom communication. If you remember your biology classes, we have the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom and the yeast kingdom, all these things. So plants communicate with animals through these exosomes. And we can eat these, and it has beneficial effect. We know that fruits and vegetables are healthy, but we didn't know that part of that came from cellular particles called, exosomes. So those are the ways you can stimulate your own stem cell activity without, actually getting some stem cells or stem cell exosomes given to you.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there, a lot to unpack, and it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, we hear the kind of generic advice all the time: exercise, eat healthy, lots of fruit and veg, and plenty of fiber, and balanced protein, and so on. But it's kind of to hear that explanation and sort of the scientific basis for it, I think just gives it so much more power, and also understanding what's happening when you do those things. I'm really fascinated. Well, I'll come back to the hormesis aspect again, because that might be a term that a lot of people haven't heard. One of the things you touched on earlier, you haven't really expanded on it yet, is the role of sleep. And we're talking about regeneration here, and clearly sleep is part of regeneration. I read a little while ago, I can't remember his surname now, Matthew somebody, Why We Sleep. You're probably familiar with that book. And he goes into a lot of scientific detail about what happens and so on. And up until then, I mean, I knew you had to get good night's sleep and so on, but that kind of scared me, because one of the things there that he points out is that in our youth, we kind of think we're invincible, and we party late and then get up early the next day to go to work or study, whatever it might be. And we think, I can catch up on that sleep sometime later. And he says, basically, that's gone. You never catch up on that when you've lost it. And, but yeah, talk to us a little bit about how important sleep is in this whole thing, because I'm finding, since I've really taken that to heart and paying attention to not just getting the right amount of sleep, but the quality of sleep as well. That's made a huge difference.
Yeah, you're right. We don't catch up on missed sleep, but young physiology is forgiving, and we get by. But yeah, listen, we are no different in some ways than plants. Plants have a light phase and a dark phase, and they have different chemistry going on in their cells during those phases. We are the same. So in the morning, we wake up, the light hits our eyes, and it stimulates the release of the stress hormone cortisol. And that is the get stuff done hormone. It's the survive hormone. It's hunt, fish, protect, survive. It is also pro-inflammatory in some ways, even though cortisone is an anti-inflammatory, which is very close to cortisol. So we have more stress during the day. Our cells are inflamed. And then the dark hits our eyes and the cortisol shuts off at nighttime. And we release another hormone, at least when we're younger, called melatonin. And you may have heard of melatonin. So we release that. And when we release it, we have deep sleep. And that deep sleep is when we repair. We repair our DNA. We have a lot of biological processes in cells that do not happen during the daytime. And we basically repair all that inflammatory damage from the daytime. So if you do not sleep properly, you can't recover from whatever damage you did that day. It could be from what you ate, could be from something in the water or the air, could be from mental stress, but sleep is very important and powerful. And everyone needs a different amount of sleep by time. And, you have to look at the depth of sleep. Many people measure this sleep using a health metric device like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring or something like that. I use an app on my phone set aside on my bedside table that listens to me. It's not perfect, but it can measure some of the sleep data, how deep the sleep is by how the breathing is happening, that kind of thing. So it's interesting to track because it gives me a game almost to play where I can improve upon it. Now, if you notice, young people, teens particularly, sleep like they're in a coma. Hard to wake them up in the morning because they have peak amounts of melatonin and at nighttime. And when we become adults, the pineal gland in the brain stops making suitable amounts of melatonin. And in older adults, like myself, I barely make any. So it makes sense to, especially in this crazy world, to take a melatonin supplement at bedtime, even if you fall asleep okay. Because many people think, oh, it's just to help me go to sleep. It does, but it also helps you sleep deeper and do more cellular repair during your dark phase at night. So I recommend a dissolvable melatonin, dissolvable because it's a peptide. Peptides are small protein fragments. If you eat it in a capsule or a pill or a gummy, you digest too much of it. You're really not getting as much. So I recommend a dissolvable under the tongue at bedtime as one of my bedtime regimens. And you'll notice you'll probably sleep deeper, dream more because you're in that deeper sleep, repair better. So that and there are metrics for this. For those people wearing health monitoring devices, consumer ones, like I mentioned. Heart rate variability is probably the best thing you can measure, HRV. It really is a subtle factor. If you do not sleep well, it's measured the next day in that HRV result.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I wear a Samsung watch and it's just updated the apps to measure HRV. And I'm getting some of that data now. And it's interesting because I still haven't figured out. So I tend to do a bike ride every second day. And then on the other days, I'll either go for a walk. Some days I'll just do a very light exercise. Some days I'll do more strenuous. So I'll walk with weighted backpack or I'll do some Pilates or something like that. But I've noticed when I've done a hard ride and think, okay, I'm going to do a really light exercise the next day, it kind of scolds me on the first morning saying that I've overexerted and I'm risking injury. And then it scolds me on the next day when I've done my recovery saying I'm too sedentary, I need to bring it up. And that's all based on the heart rate variability because clearly
Right.
there is some variability there if I'm
Right.
doing hard exercise and then
Yep.
that slow recovery phase.
As you continue to do more hard exercise and ignore that element of it, eventually it'll know that that's regular for
Yeah.
you, and you'll adjust to that. I'd rather you do a little extra hard exercise than be
Yeah,
sedentary, of
yeah.
course. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no danger of that. But I just find it interesting because we had this phase. I actually bought my smartwatch. Um, my wife had one for a long time, and she would get up in the morning and she would absolutely obsess over the sleep data. And
Yeah.
and I, because I'd say, "How did you sleep?" or "How are you this morning?" And her response would be, "Well, my data is this," and, and so on. And often it'd be like she'd be bright and bushy eyed and cheerful, but
Right,
yet
right. She felt
she
fine,
felt
but the
fine, but
data
the
was off.
data
Yeah.
was not good. She was
Yep.
unhappy about the data. So my usual follow up question was always, "But how do you feel? How do you feel?"
How do you feel is probably the most important.
And
Yeah.
and
But you learn from this data. You learn
mm,
to change some behaviors and
mm,
lifestyles. You learn, if you have an alcoholic drink, perhaps that throws off your
mm,
numbers. If you, sleep too much, it throws off your numbers. If you can see that quickly, or if you have an ailment, you have a seasonal cold or flu, it'll throw off your numbers. So,
mm.
there are a bunch of elements. Even neurostress will throw off your numbers. You have a stressful something in the family,
Oh yeah,
financial,
yeah.
whatever, it can really throw off your numbers.
Mm. Oh, and that's like I find that even without the measuring the numbers, if I've got something on my mind that I'm wrestling with,
Yeah,
often I'll have either light sleep or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll start
right.
thinking about that and can't fall back asleep. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, you might benefit from that melatonin. Take a look at
Well,
that.
that's interesting. I was going to say that I wasn't aware of the dissolvable or the what did you call it? The
Yeah, it's a dissolvable.
yeah.
It's under the tongue,
Mm.
a sublingual
Okay.
dissolvable,
Yeah.
and they're so inexpensive. I mean, I think we have Amazon here. I think you
Mm.
must as
Yeah.
well. Amazon has a product, or someone else's product sold on Amazon. It's a bottle of 300 of those. It's less than $10 US.
Mhm.
I don't know how that translates to you, but that's
Yeah.
almost a year's supply for $10 of that's easy.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yes, I used to take melatonin when I traveled, but it wasn't dissolvable. So that's something I've learnt new, and also the fact that we don't even produce any at our age.
We probably
Mm,
don't produce any appreciably, and it's a great way. You're right about travel. To If you're going many time zones and you need to reset your own
mm,
biological clock, melatonin can be used. As soon as it turns dark, wherever you are,
mm,
take some melatonin, sleep, and then it'd be easier to get back
yeah,
on that new time frame.
mm, excellent. All right. Well, coming back to the whole longevity, then, and the sleep is a key part of that, as well as the stem cells. I mean, you've given us some tips around. Um, how we can trigger it. So the what we eat and exercise, um, some of the other things that trigger hormesis, like cold baths, which I know some people do. I take cold showers in the morning. That's my
Yeah.
aim. The saunas. What I guess putting it all together, what kind of recommendations would you give people? And also the other part of that question, I suppose, is this for people that are relatively fit and healthy, or can somebody who kind of is in a position where they're unhappy with their physical well-being, can they turn things around, and how would they go with that?
Well, your benefits here are going to come from what we call the area under the curve, and on this graph, you know, amount of time doing these things is one. And number two is how much of them you embody is the other. So that what that means is the earlier you start and the more you do, the better your result. So anyone can do this. If someone who's just not taking care of themselves, if they finally have a moment of awakening, this would be perfect to jump into. If you're already healthy and fit, great. You start adding one or two of these, we call them biohacks at a time, these strategies, these tips. And, you start to make it a tradition and a part of your lifestyle. For example, dental flossing. Dental flossing, whether it's at bedtime when you get ready for bed or what, has been shown over many years that can add 1 to 2 years of life, of longevity. That's an easy thing to do for less than a minute. And, so many people, we have to encourage them to, twist their arm, please floss, please floss. It removes the extra and pro-inflammatory debris from food that brushing your teeth alone does not remove, the deeper in the gum stuff. And that can fester, and that can increase the inflammation, peptides and proteins and, what we call cytokines in your bloodstream. It can bring bacteria into your bloodstream, which increases more inflammation. So flossing is an easy thing to do. If you want to add something simple and easy that costs very, very little, that's one thing. Adding a melatonin at night, is another. Omega-3 supplementation, other supplementation. We could talk about highly anti-inflammatory. Vitamin D3. Vitamin D is often called vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is the activated form. Going into the sun does convert some of your D2 into D3, but that's usually inadequate. I recommend supplementation vitamin D3. So we can go beyond that. I can recommend 20 things, but start simple, start easy, add a hot sauna or a cold plunge, do some, different types of more strategic, efficient exercise. Like you don't have to lift weights for an hour. You could do 4 weightlifting exercises, 1 set to failure instead of 3 sets of 10, probably get more out of it. Because it's that last set you can't finish is where the muscles release the survival proteins and peptides, signal other tissues called myokines. They go into the brain and help prevent, dementia, things like this. So these are easy things to add and modify one at a time, just to build on a lifestyle longevity, healthy longevity plan.
Excellent. Some great tips there. You talked a little bit about the stress, and we mentioned burnout in terms of mental health. What are some of the things in this aging or kind of anti-aging hacks that you've talked about that we can do to look after our mental well-being?
Well, we already talked about sleep, which would be near the top of that list, right? So we'll put that aside, having been covered. And next is breathing. We don't breathe. People who don't exercise really don't breathe. They're not getting the full use of their lungs. Opening your lungs fully expanding them into their, furthest amount of infilling you can do helps open up some immune tissue that's in the lining of the lungs that we didn't even know existed until about 10 years ago. So look at yoga breathing, these deep, full breathing routines. I recommend, people do some breath work, and doing that also stimulates the brainstem and release of certain neurochemicals and neurotransmitters that help calm the body. So that's one way to reduce stress, neurostress. I just recommend 10 really deep and deeper breaths in a row. You can do that 3 times a day. Just sit, close your eyes, and do that. Some people go as far as learning how to meditate and really getting into their, into their mind that way. I've never been really good at that. I've got too much to do, but we do exercise, which helps improve. You have to breathe, especially when you're on your bike and going, fast. You have to breathe. So you're probably getting a lot of that breath work through your exercise. Not all exercise gets us there, right? If you're doing a really good yoga class or Pilates class, you probably get there, or cardiovascular work. You probably don't get it during the resistance training / weightlifting work. Those are some elements because of the things in our world and our food source, especially here in the States. We're poisoned on a regular basis. Our neurotransmitters are off, and there are some certain peptides that you can take to help reset your neurotransmitters. It's popular now to do a nasal spray of, certain neurotransmitters to help calm things, like the peptide oxytocin. which is a calming, sort of nesting peptide. It's released after lovemaking and things like that. Well, we can short circuit that and just take some by nasal spray, or there might be some ways to get some dissolvables. Some people inject it. I think that's a little overkill for that one. But there are ways to help trick or hack the system to get a longevity, an anti-inflammatory longevity result.
Fascinating. All right. Well, one of the things you've touched on a couple of times is the food. And I guess, again, coming back to the kind of general conventional wisdom is try to avoid processed food and eat natural food. I think what perhaps we should embrace more is to see, and a lot of the stuff that I've been reading recently actually says this, that treat food as medicine in some ways, and thinking about,
I agree.
okay, I mean, we all like to sit down to a nice meal, and there's a social element to it, and there's clearly the enjoyment of the tastes and flavors. But we actually, I mean, the core reason why we eat, right, is we need the food for sustenance. We need it. It's fuel for our body. So thinking of it in terms of medicine, I think is a big change. And if we think about food as medicine as well, what are some of the things that we should be avoiding, and what are some of the things we should be making sure we're getting plenty of?
Well, generally speaking, we shouldn't have simple sugars, refined sugars, right? We should have complex carbohydrates. I think the sugar is probably one of the biggest and most ubiquitous pro-inflammatory toxins out there. And we're seeing that across the board, especially here in the States, the obesity center of the world. I would say, food as medicine, it's natural food as medicine. So plants, vegetables, fruits, and then we don't focus enough on protein and fats. Everyone's worried about fat. We need the fat. It comes with the protein. Most animal fat comes with protein. Fish, you don't think of as being fat, but it has fish oil. You're getting the oil. So we should be avoiding the seed oils, which are these, fried food oils, and focus more on, the olive oils, the avocado oils, the coconut oils, things like that. And, but protein, I mean, we really are designed to process protein. I'm sorry if I put off all the vegetarians and vegans with my comments. I don't discriminate. I help people who are vegetarians and vegans also, but we struggle to get them enough protein and B, good protein, the right balances of the amino acids. It's very difficult. They do have some vegan friendly protein supplements, but it's really hard to maintain that. And if you look at the aging population, we know that the amount of muscle mass you have correlates with longevity and healthy longevity at that. So that's one thing. Number two is if you're using those muscles and moving them, you're stimulating your bones, especially with weight bearing resistance exercise. For example, when you're on the bike, Jürgen, that's great for your heart, your legs. It's not doing anything for your bone. It's not building bone. But luckily you mix it up and do Pilates and weight training and things. So the bone mass is also associated with longevity. And it's a little easier for men to maintain that. Women have a very stark drop off of hormones. And one of the things we have tended to recommend for longevity and to suppress inflammation and aging is proper hormone optimization when your hormones are declining. So that could be for men or women, not just in women to combat the effects and symptoms of menopause, but for the longevity benefits, to help maintain bone density, to help suppress cardiovascular illness, to help suppress dementia developing. And this has largely been, missed. But if you look at the cutting edge, functional, integrative, alternative medicine that we talked about, that's what's happening is it's hormone optimization.
Yeah, that's another whole episode, I guess, another whole topic to funnel down. But I'm just aware of the time and seeing what my timer here is telling me.
Well, Jürgen, you've done what, 1,500 podcasts? What's another few more? We'll just add them in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dig into this some more. This, I guess, as I've hinted a couple of times, this is really fascinating for me personally, and I'm trying to balance here, digging into what's of interest to me personally, but what can be helpful to our listeners, and making sure that we're getting some really good information there. I guess the key thing for me, and it comes back to what I said at the beginning in the introduction, is that balance of um, lengthening lifespan, but also the health span part. Because as you said, you don't want to spend your last 10 years in a nursing home being a burden and having to have somebody take care of you because you're not capable of doing that yourself. And what's even worse, and I see this from time to time with friends and relatives, uh, when the mind goes, and dementia, and how stressful that is for the loved ones that have to watch that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, do yourself a favor and your loved ones a favor. Stay young
Yeah.
forever.
All right. So I guess one of the things I'm curious about, this idea of with the work you've done, how has your understanding or how you view the connection between the physical body and our consciousness and the sense of self, how's that changed, or has it changed? Has it given you extra insights?
I might not be the best guest for that. I do believe there is a connection. I've never been good at tapping into my own, deeper consciousness. But I've always been amazed by the power of hypnosis and the subconscious and things like that. I have a side interest, although I haven't explored it yet, in what some of these microdosing of psychedelic mushroom elements and things can do for people, especially those who have suffered psychological traumas, and help remove those demons and things like that. I'm so busy. I come from the musculoskeletal side of things. I was a neurosurgeon with a spine fellowship focus. I took care of many neck and back injuries and pain syndromes. And a lot of the work we do with regenerative medicine is to help people who are in pain because of a degenerating knee or, spinal problem now. I mean, we're seeing some really neat results with use of these amniotic biologics in a single injection, for example. That's as far away from consciousness as you can get. So I'm probably not your best guest for that, but it doesn't mean I don't believe in that. I just never was able to have that element in my repertoire.
I guess what I'm often curious about is the idea of pain and how we view pain. And a lot of people, I've always been very reluctant to take painkillers, that commercial, easily obtained painkillers, and that I will take them. I have had in the past, in my younger days, real problems with migraines, and if anybody's had migraines, they will know how painful and debilitating that is. So that was certainly a time when I took painkillers. But often I think of pain as that's the body trying to tell me something. And that's where I think of, how do I tap
Right.
into, because obviously it's an unconscious response to something going on. And how do
Right.
I tap into that to say, well, okay, I'm experiencing pain here. What could be causing that? And I always try to explore and understand that first, and then address that, whether it's, it might be something as simple as I've got a headache because I haven't been drinking for about half a day. So I drink a liter of water, and usually if that's the cause, the headache will vanish. Or recently, going back to bike riding, recently I was on a multi-day tour, and I was riding my mountain bike, which I hadn't ridden for a long time, and I'd had in for several services and things. Unbeknownst to me, the seat was probably about a thumb width lower than what I normally ride it at. It wasn't enough for me to actually notice it myself. I felt quite normal on the bike. After a day and a
Right.
half of riding, I started getting knee pains, and I know from experience that often that is because the seat's either too low or too high. And I recognised the nature of the pain was, hey, the seat's got to go up. Took it up that thumb width, and within an hour the pain had gone. So that's that's where I'm kind of always fascinated by that idea of, well, the pain's actually a signal or something. I mean, it's as simple as you
Yeah.
put your hand on the hot stove and yeah, that burns and it hurts, but the
Yeah.
pain is actually telling you, don't do that. That's not good for you.
No, you're right. I mean, that's called somatic pain. Something hurts, don't do that. You've got psychological
Mm,
pain. You've got people will sometimes have amplified pain. They might have knee pain, and then psychological stress can amplify that knee pain. They may, also have what's called neuropathic pain, where it's from an injury of some kind that's not somatic, but the central nervous system or the sensation pathways are thrown off, injured, and the sense of that pain is off, the sensory apparatus of that pain. So there are different types of pain and how we approach them. It's very complex. Pain is a very difficult thing, but it's when you look at the Hippocratic Oath, it's first and foremost the one thing we're supposed to do is relieve
mm,
suffering. So that dealing with pain in its different forms is maybe one of the reasons I flock to spine
mm,
care and why I love treating joints and spine, and now applying regenerative medicine as an option. The stem cell based, the stem cell derived exosome, the amniotic products are amazing, and they're fresh from the womb. They're day zero. So you think about a sci-fi movie, Jurgen. You know, you're in space using your blaster, you get injured, they throw you into this vat with the ultraviolet light, and you come out a day later and you're like good as new. I mean, that's kind of going back into the womb, the amniotic fluid. That's what we're tapping into right now with these
yeah,
treatments.
yeah. All right. I mean, I think we might skip the buzz round today because this has been a slightly different style of conversation. But I'll ask one kind of wrap up question before I ask for some suggested actions, and that's um, if if regenerative medicine achieves its full potential, and I don't know whether that's going to happen in our lifetime or whether it kind of takes longer or it it may be a continuum. It may sort of we keep learning new things. How do you see
Yep.
the overall landscape of medicine and medical roles changing?
Yeah, I mean, I really do see us continuing to advance in this area. I see us using these more preventatively, which is a lot less expensive than treating disease. Uh, we are addressing root causes as opposed to just symptoms. We are able to repair things with less surgeries, fewer pharmaceuticals, and it's going to be necessary because if people are going to live longer and healthier, we need to be able to maintain them. Moving
Mm,
parts, you know, dementia, and even against cancer, we've got some specific elements of regenerative medicine we're now using to address, cancer cells in the body.
mm. Yeah, wonderful. All right. Well, it's been a wonderful conversation, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about the work you do? Maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you shared with us today.
Oh yeah, we love any feedback and any questions or issues. We love to meet new people. You can celebrate the renewal of your cells at Recelebrate, ReCellebRate. Our website is recelebrate.com. Our social media handles are Recelebrate. I believe if you search that term using your browser search tool, we are, as far as I know, the only people using that word with that spelling that
Hmm.
way.
Excellent. All right. And we'll make sure the link in the show notes has the right spelling. So when people click, they can get straight through to that. So as we wrap up, Jeff, what action would you like our listener to take from our conversation today, other than just listen again and learn some more?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I think first and foremost, if this resonates with anyone or provoked thought, please write comments to Jurgen on his podcast pages and let him know, like and subscribe to his material, and share the comments. And I'd be happy to get back on and go in detail on certain topics that did resonate with people. Secondly, the easiest thing you can do is move and exercise. That'll keep you younger, longer, healthier, and achieve most of your goals that you want to achieve. So exercise. If you're not exercising, get to it. If you are exercising, let's get more out of it.
Excellent. Yeah, let's get more out of it. That's great. And I was just thinking there, if people are thinking I need to do more exercise, go for a walk, put on a set of headphones and listen to this podcast.
Yeah, then you're exercising your brain and your legs.
Yeah.
And soon Jurgen's going to be offering the bright yellow headphones with a weighted feature, so you can have the additional weight bearing.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds good. Just got to figure out how to make them cordless. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jeff, for sharing your time and your insights and your wisdom with us so generously today. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I've really enjoyed it and learned quite a few things that I can change or implement in what I'm doing, my lifestyle. I hope that that's the same for the listeners, and all the best for the future. And please do stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.